Gareth, thanks for joining us. You've had a chance to reflect now, particularly on your time at England. I think back to when you left the role, and I thought, well, maybe it'll take years for you to be truly appreciated in terms of everything you achieved. What was it like writing the book in terms of reflecting on everything?
Well, what I wanted to do was I realised the role I held is one of the most high-profile leadership roles in the country. I wasn't interested in doing a memoir. I don't think it's right for a leader to talk about things that happen in private. I think you've got to have integrity over those moments. But I did recognise across the 8 years and having left the role that lots of the situations I was in are complex leadership principles that transfer into business, into other organisations, definitely into other sports. And I wanted to capture some of those lessons from the experiences I had and then pass them on to other leaders, really, whether they're youngsters coming through or experienced leaders who are running companies. So that was the aim of the book, really.
And it's how to be compassionate at times, but also taking tough decisions, which in your case is, dropping players, phasing players out, which obviously many companies might have to do.
Yeah, I think people view you in, they try to capture your leadership in one or two words, but all leaders have to flex styles. It can't all be hugs and cuddles and warmth. You have to make tough calls at times. You have to be very resilient. You have to have challenging conversations with people to allow people to be the best they can be. Again, I think that will apply across people in business, in schools, in other organisations where each individual they're working with needs slightly different handling. And again, I hope that comes through in what we've written.
You do write about the games when England players faced racist abuse. Is there anything that you'd have done differently looking back? Maybe there's a way to take an even bigger stand, not playing the match, stopping the match. Do you reflect on those moments, particularly because it's about how the players are feeling?
Well, I think what we made sure was that all of our players were comfortable with the way that we were going to deal with things. We always talked that through as a team. The players that I worked with always wanted the story to be about football. They didn't really want to be front and centre of a story on racism, but it was important to support our players. Our players were attacked, were verbally attacked on several occasions, and we had to stand with them and for them. So we weren't looking to try and be, make a stand for the sake of it and be seen to be doing something. But I think it was very powerful for us as a team that those nights where we were under attack, the players felt supported. We did what we could, but we also had a responsibility to make sure that we didn't overstep our reach as well.
You do focus about the cross-transferable skills, how what you do could apply to the army, into the business life. Perhaps you touch less on how football is run, and not necessarily in England, but do you think football is well run internationally? Are there things that could be done better from your sort of reflections on leadership when writing the book?
I don't know enough about the workings behind the scenes on how FIFA work, how UEFA work. What I know from a leadership perspective is it's very easy from the outside to look at how anything is done and to come to simple conclusions about how it might be done better. But whenever you're making decisions in leadership roles, whether that's manager of the national football team, in government, there's all sorts of complex things going on. People see simple solutions, but problems are very, very complex, and every decision you make, there's a knock-on from that decision. So I'd always be, because I've lived in a high-profile role, I'd always be very careful about how I assessed what other people are doing, because I don't have all the information when I'm making those assessments. I'll have a view, but I've got to remember the life I led where everybody was telling me what to do without knowing all the landscape behind those decisions.
That is really tough as well, facing the scrutiny. Do you reflect on what is fair scrutiny, what's too harsh? We've got a lot of concerns about mental health now in football, the awful loss of the former Liverpool manager, Matt Beard has shone a light on that, which can be hidden struggles as well as just the sort of the brutality of some of the way managers are treated. Does it make it even harder to manage?
Well, I think we have concerns about how we deal with mental health issues across society, really. You know, this is a generation of young people especially who, for the first time, have come through their lives being exposed to a mobile device that they spend an awful lot of time on, that gives them almost a view of perfection of the world that isn't a reality. Men in particular aren't very good about talking about their emotions, sharing their emotions, and you know, we've seen tragically a couple of very high-profile suicides in recent times, and it's a reminder to look out for people, to try and help people when we can, to have a compassionate side to the way we deal with things. Lots of people suffer behind the scenes, and I would definitely encourage men to talk about things because we're social animals, and when you share problems, it doesn't necessarily resolve them. But I think it's part of a process of being able to deal with emotions that are often pent up inside of you. Your
team was built to very much represent multiracial Britain and being very patriotic. Is any of this being lost?
Well, I don't think we do need to divide the two things. We can be very patriotic and for unity, and our players now, a lot of our players are dual nationality. That could be their family's got a background in Ireland, it could be a family background in Nigeria. They're hugely passionate about playing for England, and equally they're passionate about their family heritage. And that's going to be the case more and more in the world because it's easier to travel, it's easier for our kids to go and live abroad at some point. So the world is more transient, and I think we are wrestling with that a little bit. What was our national identity 50, 60 years ago was probably a lot clearer. But it doesn't mean people are less passionate about being English. I know what that means to me, being English, being British. I do think we often highlight the disunity more. There's more noise around that, but I think there's quietly more unity than people might think.
And football can often provide that unity. It did seem for a lot of the time. Some people maybe characterise you as being very political, whereas in reality perhaps wasn't as political as it was perceived. But that unifying nature of football can be very powerful.
Yeah, the brilliant thing about England is that it brings every generation of a family together. It brings every part of our community together. And those big nights, everybody remembers where they were. You're creating memories for a nation that live with people for decades to come. I remember 1990s, 1980s watching England play and what I was doing and who I was with. And on the political side, we didn't go looking for politics. We just tried to protect our players. And when you're in a position where you're leading your country in a certain area, you are dealing with global situations that have to be handled in the right way.
Now, very recently, something you might not be able to imagine when you're a player, you're at Harvard giving a talk. What was that experience like? What lessons were you trying to impart?
Well, people might have a view on how I dealt with the football side of the job, but there's a reality that I held one of the highest profile leadership positions in the country. And I learned a lot from that because it was an 8-year period as well. We had 5 prime ministers in that time. So I think I've learned about leading under pressure. I think I've learned about how to carry yourselves in that sort of a position. And some of the professors at Harvard were very keen for me to go and speak about that aspect of the job. I enjoy talking about leadership. I think it's so important we help young people in terms of their leadership. It's going to have a huge impact on our world in the future if we give young leaders the right guidelines, the things they need to focus on, the things they need to be aware of. So I really enjoy that aspect of working with young people.
And what's going to motivate you in the many decades to come? You talk about having to set targets even when you start a job in the first 6 months you might want to achieve. Do you then start to now set targets like, in 10 years I want to achieve that? It's like, it's great, I reached these highs with England, but what's going to motivate me?
Yeah, I'm particularly passionate about our young people. I think we all recognise that we need to do more. You know, the narrative when I turn my television on in the morning is very negative about our country, and we've got to shift that. We've got to give people hope. We've got an incredible amount of talent in our country. We've got to show young people that there is a future here, that, you know, because of our legal system, we're a country people want to create businesses. And we've got talented people who can go and run or be parts of those businesses. So I'm very passionate about how we might put more mentoring in place for young people, how we can help guide them through early stages of life. I'm going to spend a lot of time working on that. I spoke about it in the lecture I did, Dimbleby lecture, and whilst it's fine to highlight a problem, you then need to go and try and address it as well, and I'm very conscious of that.
And finally, are you optimistic for the future of football? So many players are concerned about welfare, burnout, too many matches, how you cope. Is there a concern or optimism for where football's going?
Well, that's a very big subject, because there's the financial aspects of football, there's the playing aspects of football. So, you know, football has survived, thrived incredibly in the last 30, 40 years. There will always be challenges, but I think in terms of all sports, you know, if you look across the board, there's probably too many matches at the moment in all sports, but finance drives that. The finances within sport have never been greater. So until people are prepared to accept maybe earning a little bit less money, there'll be this push for more matches in all sports, I think.
And are you proud looking back and everything?
Well, if you'd said to me when I was 8 years old that I'd have represented England more than any other person in its history, and that I'd go to 8 tournaments as a player and a coach, I'd have bitten your hand off. Of course, once you get there, you wish you'd been able to win one of those tournaments, and you'd wish you'd been able to bring the trophy for people. So you're never entirely satisfied with what you've done. But I'm I'm at peace with all of that. For me now, it's about the next stage of my life and what I go on and how I use my time in the future.